Hello there. I didn't see you. Welcome to another adventure of Where in the World is Katelyn going to be? As always, I'd like to start by thanking everyone who has already donated to my world race. Today, we have another exciting country we are going to visit. Let's see where it's going to be. Oh, this time we are going just south of Costa Rica into Panama. Panama is the southernmost part of Central America. And so to start, as always, I would like to start by telling you what I will be doing in this country. Well, Adventures in Mission, the organization I'm partnering with, has not given us any information specific to ministry partners here in Panama. And so I'm going to take a minute and explain what the Ask the Lord month is. So about 1 month out of all the 11 months I'll be gone, we won't have any ministry partners we will be with. What we will be doing is we will be praying to God and simply asking the Lord what we need to do. So there is no set plan in place for the racers and no ministry partners already to connect with. We spend the month prayerfully asking the Lord to guide us and show us the work He wants us to do. So this could lead us to any part of the country. But as sort of an idea, I went on the world race and looked at different blogs to see what exactly some of the racers did in Panama. So this blog came from Michelle Dunley. So Michelle Dunley's group ended up partnering with Youth with a Mission. And what they did was kind of different each day. One of the things they did was they distributed Bibles throughout Panama. And in each of the places, every time they handed someone a Bible, they would specifically pray for that person. They then went and visited a children's cancer center where they got to just sing songs and laugh with these kids going through these tough circumstances. Another thing they did was called The Village. They climbed up on top of a mountain and they got to hang out with a whole bunch of cool kids, and they played duck, duck, goose and just laughed and had an amazing time. The other thing they did was they went to an orphanage and they were able to love on some kids. They also taught English classes to the kids at the base of the Youth with a Mission organization. They also held different Bible studies and ended up going to a feeding center where they ended up being able to feed kids in poverty. They also went to a nursing home and were able to spend some quality times playing bingo, card games, and a lot of different dominoes with like 30 to 40 elderly men and women. They also put on different skits throughout their time in Panama, and another organization they partnered with was Mechanics with a Mission. It was a very fun project because they got to paint inside a mechanic shop, and then they also got to break down boulders that were in the way and move them. There were also different projects on their base that they got to work with. They ended up dusting, sweeping, mopping, making note cards, and preparing for meals. So within Panama, this is about a basic idea of what a day in the life might look like. So now it's time for the fun facts portion. So the population of Panama is a little more than 4 million people. The average language spoken within Panama is Spanish. So this is the second country where I will have to learn Spanish in. Within Panama, the religions are about 63% of the people are Catholic, 25% Protestant, and the other half of the country do not have a set religion. As I said earlier, Panama is the southernmost country in Central America. Panama contains the only place in the world where you can see the sun rise and the sun set at the same exact place. So there's this part in Panama that's only about 30 miles that separates the Atlantic coast from the Pacific coast. So you can see the sun rise and set at the same exact location. which is pretty cool because that's the only place you can do it in the world. All of Panama is slightly smaller than South Carolina. And just like Costa Rica, Panama has the dry season from December to April and the rainy season from May to November. So my group will be hitting Panama about in between the dry and rainy seasons. In 1821, Panama declared independence from Spain and joined the Republic of Gran Colombia, which became known as the Republic of New Granada in 1831. However, Panama finally achieved complete independence from Colombia on November 3rd in 1903 with assistance from the U.S. One of the things Panama is most famously known for is their Panama Canal. The treaty to construct the Panama Canal was signed on November 18, 1903 between Panama and the U.S. The Panama Canal was built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers between 1904 and 1914, meaning it took about 10 years to construct the Panama Canal. But between 1914 and 1930, some 5,600 Panama Canal workers died, but it was mainly due to disease. The Panama Canal stretches about 50 miles between Panama City and Colon from the Atlantic side. The lowest paid toll ever on the Panama Canal was only 36 cents, and it was charged to Richard Halliburton, who swam through the canal in 1928. U.S. troops controlled the Panama Canal until 1999, when Panama assumed full control of their canal. The oldest continually operating railroad in the world is in Panama. The Panama Railroad opened in 1855 and runs right alongside the canal. The canal stretches 51 miles across the country, creating a travel route from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Without this route, ships would have to travel around South America to reach Asia and the Pacific Northwest. It saves them a little less than 8,000 miles doing the Panama Canal. A little unknown fact about Panama, however, is they set multi-world records in the area of bird watching and fishing. I didn't even know this was a sport. However, baseball is the most popular sport within the country. In spite of its relatively small area, Panama has a great variety of landscape and habitats. Tropical rainforests, savannas, cool montane forests, tidal lands covered by silted mangrove trees, coral reefs, and beaches. Because of its ancient role as a land bridge over which species have migrated between the continents, the isthmus is home to rich intermixture of plant and animal life. As a result of this interchange, Panama's wildlife includes such mammals as the three-toed sloth, anteaters, and armadillos, which derived from South America, as well as jaguars and deer, which originally came from North America. Also among Panama's rich fauna are several species of giant sea turtles, which lay their eggs on the beaches. In Panama, the landscape can grow 10,000 different types of plant species, including 1,400 varieties of orchids are grown here, 678 ferns, and more than 1,500 varieties of trees. Panama has more than 976 bird species, which is more than the United States and Canada combined together. Panama is a rich farmland where they can grow vegetables, coffee, and bananas. Panama is a beautiful country with many rivers, white beaches, and mountains. Off the coast of Panama are over 1,500 islands. Since Panama's cultural heritage is influenced by many ethnicities, the traditional cuisine in the country includes ingredients from many different types of cultures. A mix of African, Spanish, and Native American techniques. Typically, Panama's foods are mild flavored. without the pungency of some of Panama's Latin American and Caribbean neighbors. Common ingredients are maize, rice, wheat, flour, plantains, yuca, beef, chicken, pork, and seafood. Well, now that we have ended the fun facts with Katelyn, we are off to celebrate Bible time. So today, since it is Holy Saturday, I decided to share a story from the book of Esther. So, to give you a summary, I've been reading through the book of Esther, and one of the most interesting things about this book is God is not mentioned one time. So, to give you some background, the main characters, you have two Jews who are Mordecai and Esther. You want to remember they're Jews. You have the king, who is always a drunken mess. Then you have the Persian official Haman. So, to start the story, there is this giant banquet to show off the king's greatness. Well, the king ends up getting drunk, and he says, "Hey, I have the most beautiful queen, Vashti," but he wanted to start by showing her off, but the queen refused. And so, after that happens, the king ends up making this statement that all the men are in charge of their wives, and the wives have to do what they say. And so then the king banishes Vashti out of his castle and decides to hold a beauty pageant. And so Esther is one of the people who are entered into this beauty pageant, and the king basically thinks she's the most beautiful, and she ends up winning the pageant. And what happens next is the king makes her queen over his people. Well, throughout the whole time, Esther never mentioned to the king or anyone that she was a Jew. Well, eventually she's queen, and then you have Mordecai who comes into play. And he's overhearing two people plotting to kill the king. And Mordecai tells Esther, and then Esther tells the king, and Mordecai gets all the credit for saving the king's life. Next we hear about Haman, who is an Agagite. He is descendant of the ancient Canaanites. Haman gets promoted to the biggest position in the kingdom and demands that everyone kneels before him. Well, Mordecai refuses to kneel before Haman. Well, Haman gets filled with rage, and he basically persuades the king to make this decree that he's going to kill all the Jewish people because he found out Mordecai was Jewish. So then Haman and Mordecai and the king have this banquet to celebrate this really horrible decision that they're going to kill all the Jews on the 13th of Adar. Well, now the focus turns to Esther and Mordecai, who are the only hope for the Jewish people. They make a plan that Esther is going to reveal her Jewish identity to the king and ask him to reverse the decree. But here's the kicker. It is against Persian law to approach the king without royal request and is worthy of death. But Mordecai is confident that even if Esther doesn't speak, deliverance of the Jews will arrive from another place. Then Mordecai is all like, "Who knows? Maybe you became queen for this very reason." Esther then speaks with so much bravery and saying her amazing words, "If I perish, I perish." Now we are going to start to hear about the evil rehearsal of Haman's plans. So Esther gives Haman and the king a banquet, and she says she wants to make a special request to them that will be at an exclusive banquet the following day. Well, that night, Haman leaves drunk again, and he runs into Mordecai, and he commands that there be this giant stake built so the next day Mordecai will be put onto the stake to be killed. It seems like nothing can get worse for the Jews or Mordecai. But all of a sudden, the story pivots. So for some reason, the king can't sleep, and he has the royal chronicles read for him a good bedtime story. And he just happens to hear about how Mordecai saved the king's life earlier in the story. He had totally forgotten. So the next morning, Haman requests for Mordecai's execution, but the king in that moment orders Haman to honor Mordecai publicly for saving his life. So Haman has to lead Mordecai around on a royal horse, telling everyone to praise him. So the day after is Esther's second banquet, and the king and Haman arrive, and is basically like, hey king, I'm actually Jewish, and Haman enacted a decree to murder me, Mordecai, who saved your life, by the way, and murder all the Jews. Mic drop. Nothing else. So, of course, the king had a lot to drink again. And so when he hears the news, he goes into yet another drunken rage, and he orders Haman to be impaled by the very stake he made for Mordecai. However, his execution doesn't solve the problem on the decree to kill the Jews. Now, Esther and Mordecai have to make a plan to reverse the decree, and they discover that the king can't revoke a decree he has already made. So instead, the king commissions Mordecai to issue a counter decree that basically says the Jews are now ordered to defend themselves and destroy anyone who plotted to kill them. Then Mordecai, Esther, and the Jews all celebrate and hold a banquet because now they are saved. And Mordecai is elevated to a seat beside the king. Then eventually the decree days come, and the Jews triumph over all their enemies. And first they destroyed Haman's family, and then any Persian official who decided to join in on Haman's evil plot. And then the second day, they get permission to destroy anyone who plotted against them throughout the entire kingdom, and they celebrate because the Jews are saved. Then Mordecai and Esther create this 2-day feast called Purim that celebrates their deliverance from destruction. Then it ends with Mordecai rising into second in command and talks about his royal greatness. Now, if you mention, throughout this whole entire story, God was never mentioned. And since it's Holy Saturday, I think this was super important to share because we're at a point where Jesus was just crucified on the cross, and now we are like, where is God? But as you see throughout this story, you can see where God is working behind the scenes even. So even if God isn't mentioned, and even if it seems he is absent, he is still faithful to his promises in you. So thank you for joining along on Katelyn's Where in the World is Katelyn Going to Be? See you next time!